see a lot of laws being proposed in all the states. I think you're even going to see some federal law, some federal legislation coming out of it as well.
Right, because remember, the FBI has a lot of jurisdiction over some of the federal laws that involve the internet and cell phone use, FCC regulations, and that type of thing. So there will be a lot of that.
I guess we have another issue that's come up because of a suicide. There was a young girl who had a boyfriend. Then apparently there is a problem with a suicide, and she has no justice. She's committed suicide, but there's no case because the victim is no longer allowed to testify. What happens to the victim's rights for having been harassed on the internet, for having broken up with a boyfriend and other people not particularly liking that idea, causing her grief and enough grief so that she committed suicide, and her ability to say that boy raped me is not even her word against his word now, she's dead. What happens to the fact that that boy can't even be tried because there's no ability for that girl to testify? What happens to that in a legal standpoint? Is there anyone that can...
Well, a legal case can still be brought. It depends on what evidence there is. Sure. I mean, if there was a rape kit, if we're saying that this was a rape and they have evidence that, you know, there's DNA and other people saw things, you know, when you have a murder trial, you never have the murder victim there to testify, obviously. There's other evidence that can be brought.
But then if that's the case, and that certainly makes sense, David, why would they dismiss this case right now because there's not a person there to...
I'm not familiar with that case, but if the only evidence they had was what she said...
The he said, she said about the rape in the first place...
all the evidence, right, then that can be problematic.
There's not enough to prove the intent.
There's no other evidence that can be brought in to support the claim that's being made.
But that's not to say you're precluded from filing a civil case.
Correct.
So you have a different standard of proof.
Right.
And I can't quite remember, but this is probably a good time for you to bring it up. What's the difference between the standard of proof on the criminal versus the civil?
On the civil side, you have proof beyond a preponderance of the evidence. On the criminal, proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
So the difference is preponderance of the evidence should take a scale, they say, and if you tip the scale ever so slightly, then you've met your burden. Beyond reasonable doubt doesn't mean beyond all doubt, but you have to eliminate most other possibilities.
Interesting. Outcomes. The young child that commits suicide or takes pills that she shouldn't, the teenager, the college student, is it true that never does the outcome affect what extent of the law that we have to grapple with? I don't know what else is going to happen because of internet, texting, sexting, but not everyone commits suicide. Some just are a little bit upset. Is there supposed to be some intermediary law that says I can make you cease and desist before I get to the point where I'm beyond
I've actually done that in my own career where a person felt harassed, maybe not to the level that it could be a criminal, they could be charged criminally, so I've actually been retained to send out a letter that said cease and desist, stop harassing, otherwise here are the results.
In our statutes, for instance, domestic restraining orders, the domestic abuse statute now does have language in there about cyber stalking, cyber harassment, so that if the only harassment the husband or wife or whatever domestic relation partners are involved in the case is over the internet, that's still grounds to get a domestic restraining order.
It's a shame that should happen. I don't know that we should be defending the bully right now because certainly there are many kids who just haven't quite learned how to handle what might be a immaturity or an abnormal amount of aggression. What do you think, before someone has to have a lawyer involved because there's a criminal case and a suicide and some tragedy, where do you think is the point that we can intercept that child and do something to help him while we've been focusing on the victim? What do we do to help the bully before he ends up with consequences that are legal? And I know this isn't meant to be a shrink session right now, but certainly there's punishment that we've been talking about. Is it really just about punishment? This is open conversation here, obviously.
It brings a lot of different issues here.
Discipline?
Yeah, obviously discipline and parents, schools taking action. But, you know, as you say, it's almost should be a shrink show for that purpose because there are so many different reasons why people or children, and if you want to talk about children, may bully somebody else. So you have to get to the root cause of what the problem is to resolve the problem. One of the things I think, if it's a school situation, is you should also address those other people who aren't the actual bully, but the ones that may be supporting the bully, and say, wait a minute, this is another person in your school, a friend. You can't just go out there and, you know, jump on the bandwagon and jump in. Who was it, Martin Luther King, who said something like, the word of my enemy I will forget, but the silence of my friends I'll always remember. You know, your friends have to support you too. So that's one way to go about trying to reduce schoolyard or cyberbullying.
I think in some cases, I've actually seen it go as far as where they remove the child from the school, separate the bully from the victim. Expulsion, suspension, that gets your discipline is your discipline answer. So
and get the bully some help if there's a root cause. You know, you always hear on the schoolyard what the problem is. I think bullying over the internet, cyberbullying, may be a little bit different because you're hiding behind a screen, or you've got some distance between you and the person you're bullying. There may be other issues going on, or it may be the same, but either way, you need to get to the problem.
I think there was a Bush law that said it carries heavier weight if you do this bullying anonymously, as if you were to fess up to it, it was less of a problem. I'm not sure that it should be. In either case, bullying is bullying. But since it's taken on educational, legal, financial responsibility, it seems like the normal case of bullying or aggression isn't something that we can easily overlook anymore, although apparently in the school systems, while they're looking to find guidelines and punishments, as you indicate, it certainly seems that there should be other opportunities for maybe other students to surround that bully and help him deal with other issues rather than
I think they should be educated. I think it's got to
right.
be educational. I think when they start at a school system, they need to have, David said it's by law they have to have a school policy, but education, have a some type of open meeting with the students and
an assembly, a classroom, bring lawyers in to talk to the students to tell them what they're facing.
It's education.
Yeah, maybe we should do that.
Maybe we should do that. We did talk about going to a local school, and perhaps that would be a worthwhile thing. I'm sure that most principals and even teachers don't want to just think about what they have to do to issue guidelines and punishments for this. It would be so much better if they could teach children how to amicably work out what differences they have rather than just calling them fat, ugly, and
there are programs I think I've seen or heard of in the Providence school system where they try to bring someone in to help kids mediate their problems with each other. This is just another form of that, and it's not a bad idea. Education is really a good place to start.
Maybe part of the DARE program can include bullying issues.
A few schools apparently had partners for a while where the local school jock ended up partnering with the underdog, the one who was bullied, and for some reason that seemed to show that that younger bullied child or that smaller bullied child had an advocate, which we've talked about at times too, and wasn't that a wonderful way of dealing with a problem and avoiding it? Hopefully it will.
And of course the education of the child who's not involved, saying bring this to someone's attention and letting them know that's okay, is another thing that can be done.
We thank you for joining us. Jackie, David, thank you. Our discussion of legal matters continues. We hope you'll continue to be with us.